more than 100 unique styles of beer, each with their own set of ingredients, process, guidelines, history, and experience. If you're a beer lover, an industry leader, or somewhere in between, a better knowledge of beer style will improve your life and your work.
Welcome to A Sense of Beer Style, essential beer style training for those who want to lead in food and beverage. I'm Julia Herz.
And I'm Jeremy Storton.
We're advanced Cicerones, beer judges, home brewers, and we're excited to guide you through the vast and wonderful world of beer styles.
Welcome back to the Sense of Beer Style, everyone, and welcome back, Julia.
Hello.
This is a fun beer style. They're all fun beer styles. You're probably tired of hearing me say that, but this is fun because this one takes us to the northwest of France, just over the border of Belgium. As story has it, as I've heard it from very reliable sources, one of whom was actually French, in a little university town called Lille, France, Lille. This style was kind of kept alive because, as styles kind of come and go, they gain favor and lose favor. This beer style was kept alive because of all the university students just loved drinking the Bière de Garde. And so we still have this beer style today. It's hard to find. I'm not going to lie. It's hard to find. But when you find them, they are delicious. And so thank you to all of the folks up in Northwest France for keeping this style alive. This beer style is very, very much like the Saison. We'll dive into this a little bit more in a minute, but this is different because it is actually comes from France, comes from that intersection where Belgium and France kind of bleed over. The border doesn't just, define France versus Belgium. The culture still kind of influences each other. And so that's where we get more of a French style version of this. We're also going to look at, there's blonde pale versions, there's amber versions, and there are brown versions as well, and we'll dive in that as well. But one other thing I want to bring up too is another beer style that is relative to this, that doesn't have its own style, is very, very seldom discussed, but the Bière de Mars. And I just want to tap my foot on this base real quick. The Bière de Mars, some of you have heard it. I've never found one. I've never consumed one, but it is essentially a Bière de Garde brewed in March, and it's meant to be consumed when it's fresh, not aged, like some of these can be. But it's rare. But if you hear the term Bière de Mars, just think Bière de Garde brewed in March. So we can kick that off. We've got that little backstory to kind of let us know where we are. We've set the scene to where we are in the world. Now let's dive into the ingredients and we can really get a handle on this thing.
What a great introduction. And I can say I've personally been to Lille. My oldest son, studied in Roubaix, which is, it was 30 minutes kind of from Lille, a couple train stops over. And it's about 30 miles from the Belgian border. And it is a big student town. Lille certainly is one of the larger French cities. So super exciting to know that I've been to the birth of this style. And Bière de Garde, by the way, means beer for keeping, to guard it, right?
Yeah,
so you just said Mars means March. Bière de Garde, guard means for keeping. So that's an easy way to remember it.
Yeah.
And you're right that traditionally they're brewed in the spring and then laid down and meant to be enjoyed by the end of the summer when it's warmer out. So you're guarding it after you've brewed it. And the color variance is also important to the ingredients because you'll start basically with basic Belgian or French style beer style fermentables, not necessarily Pilsner malt, but usually a base malt that then you sneak into it Vienna malt, Munich malt, some crystal malt, depending on if you want it to be a blonde, right? If you want it to be a brune or a brown, that's what that means, and an amber. So you've got the options of those three types, and you're going to sneak in some specialty malts to take that base malt to a darker and sometimes a little bit more bump of flavor type of place. So ingredients besides the malts are going to be sugar for an adjunct. Really, any kind of sugars can be used. It's not a negative thing. It's a fermentable. If you're using sugar for adjuncts, you often don't want it to have influence. I'm not used to hearing that these have Belgian candy sugar. A lot of Belgian beer styles would ferment with Belgian candy sugar, which is not only just a fermentable, but does bring color and more flavor to the party. I'm going to think the adjuncts here are more just base fermentables of approachable sugars that don't have advanced flavors. And then the fun thing about Bière de Garde, the beer you're guarding and keeping, is it can be an ale or a lager yeast. So you could literally, if you brewed one of these, split the batch, ferment one with lager, ferment one with ale yeast, and I love those experiments and seeing the differences. So that's a fun one to be aware of. And no matter what, it's often fermented while it's being guarded in those cooler months at cooler temperatures. So you're not going to have a lot of advancement of esters, because even if you're using ale yeast, esters and phenols are coaxed out by warmer temperatures. So that's a good one to know. And then cold conditioning, treating it like a lager. So there's a lot of hybrid going on because of the approach of the two yeasts. And the continental hops that are used are definitely not going to be a big emphasis for aroma and flavor. It's more so about a base back note of bitterness. So that's kind of your big picture. Now let's get into appearance.
Yeah, and for those of you who are listening and watching, before we started recording, I was telling Julia that I had one of these that I was storing, I was keeping. It's a Bière de Garde, and I was holding true to the tradition. I was holding on to that for a special occasion, and I thought, what a great occasion it would be to open that up during the Stylecast and share with you what I had found and covered. But I couldn't wait. I got selfish, and I fixed a fantastic dinner last fall, and I decided to open that up, and it was everything that I thought it would be. But when it comes to appearance, what you would have seen if you were at my table, or if I waited till the Stylecast to share it with you, the particular one that I had was more of the amber color. So keep in mind, we can have blonde versions, we can have brown versions. This one happened to be amber. And of course, just a quick aside, you can make a lot of correlations that you can't hang your hat on these, but you can make a lot of correlations between color and expected flavor. There's a lot of overlap there. Just a little tip from your buddy Jer. But this beer that I had, it was amber. It was pretty clear. I kept it well, and I poured it silently, so I didn't rouse a lot of yeast, at least till the end. Then it got cloudy, but there was a pretty good clarity there, and that is what I expect as long as we pour it properly. If you stir the bottle, if you lay the bottle on its side, then open it up, well, then it's going to be cloudy, and you know what? Just drink it anyway. It's still going to be good. The foam on this was off-white, and it persisted for days. It was fantastic, and it went really well. I forget what I had with it, but it was very perfect for the occasion. But that's what we're looking for, those 3 different color ranges. So basically, there is no range. It's anywhere from pale to brown, but good clarity, depending on you, and a really good foam persistence. That's what we're looking for in a Bière de Garde. Let's talk about aroma.
I would say an aroma of this, if you were served these blind, this is one of the hardest Belgian style-esque beers to nail based on aroma, because it's really not a big aspect of Belgian fermentation characteristics that's coming off the yeast. You're going to smell this. You're going to get an essence of a rich malt, complex, the style guidelines say, or to moderate intensity. And you're going to get that bready, maybe that dark honey, and the like. And you might still get some phenols, a little bit of peppery. I talk about pink peppercorn a lot when it comes to phenols from ale yeast, but it might be fermented with that lager yeast, as we were saying. So you might not get any phenols and esters. You also are going to, maybe it's optional, get a hint of those kind of herbal continental hop notes. That is not a big prominent thing that you're looking for. So generally speaking, if you were handed this blind and just smelling it, you might not know to get yourself to this style. So you want to kind of really dial in, and as you see these beers, drink as many as possible over your lifespan, and then you'll maybe get a better reading on it. But it's a hard one. It's a sneaky one to taste blind and identify. It's going to have some ethanol, right, but not a prominent amount. So you're also looking for a little bit of warming kind of bite or tinge to the nose from that ethanol. And then you definitely have characteristics of carbonation that are going to kind of tickle the tongue and the nasal, or tickle the nose and the nasal passages. But that's it. It's really hard to just to script this except to say it's more of a malty beer, and depending on the yeast, you're going to have an indication of it if it's an ale Bière de Garde or a lager.
And that's perfect because yes, this is a malt forward beer, and that's one of the distinctions between that and a saison. But this is malt forward, balanced by fermentation character with a touch of hops. Is the the short elevator speech I would give on what a Bière de Garde is. But again, depending on the color, and remember, I just mentioned that there's a correlation between color and flavor. So we're looking at a medium to high malt prominence first because, like we just said, it's malt forward. But depending on the color, depending on the grains that they put in there, it could be toasty. It's always going to be rich and complex, but it could be biscuity, could be toffee, could be honey, could be caramel. It could be just kind of getting notes to like a light chocolate. These are all the things that you can expect. But just keep in mind that the color will kind of help dictate which way we're going with this as far as the flavor goes. And so I'll let you extrapolate that as you will. We are going to, depending if it's a lager or an ale, we may have greater and lesser esters, the fruity flavors that come through. If so, we can have a low to moderate esters that we could be plum fruit, stone fruits, maybe a little bit of citrus. Again, depending on the grains. The alcohol could be low to moderate as well. It depends on the strength, but just a little bit of pop is perfectly okay. Should never be hot, should never be harsh. The bitterness there, it will be there, but it ought to be moderately low. Keep in mind the intensity goes malt first, fermentation second, hops last. So the bitterness is just there for a little balance. The hop flavor is just there for a little spice. And so keep all that in mind. One of the things other that I want to keep in mind too is because even though this is technically a French beer, it falls into the Belgian tradition. So it is going to be, it is going to be dry in the finish. We'll talk about the carbonation in just a minute, but there's going to have a nice dryness to finish off to clean your palate when it's done. These flavors that you get from the phenols, they can span from your pink peppercorn, Julia, or a lot of the times I taste as almost like a white pepper, which is a smoother, creamier version of the black pepper you put on your food. These are just examples of what you can get from this. Allspice is another flavor I get from time to time with these Belgian beers. One thing I want to mention too, though, is these beers, even though they are meant to be kept and stored and aged, they should never be funky. They should never be bready. And we shouldn't have any TCA or trichloroanisole, which is most of you know this as cork taint. I have tasted some of these beers that taste musty, that smell musty. That kind of reminds me of like an old basement from an old house with like uncovered earth and everything. You just get that funky wet wood smell. That should not be in your beer, even if it is aged. That's a fault. So keep a watch out for your TCA, your trichloroanisole, and make sure it's not in there. And if it is, go find another one. Let's talk about mouthful.
Great job overviewing that. It's a really important point. Bière de Garde does not mean musty or moldy. That's important, right? And it can be oxidized. I mean, the style guidelines allow for oxidative qualities because you are laying down and aging these, but you don't want that oxidation to take away. So I think that's really, really good that you brought that aspect up. And mouthfeel, very straightforward, medium to medium, light body. Style guidelines talk about smooth, creamy, silky character, moderate to moderate high carbonation. I definitely want these to be refreshing, to be carbonated, right? That's a big aspect of it. And then a little bit or moderate alcohol warmth, but you don't want it hot or overly boozy at all. That would be weird.
Yeah. So this is the fun part, style comparison. Well, obviously, we're going to go toe-to-toe with the Belgian Saison. The French Bière de Garde and the Belgian Saison are going to go toe-to-toe. And I've tasted so many different versions of a Saison that it's really unfair to pin it into one thing. So take this with a grain of salt, because every Saison I've had is vastly different. But if you took the average Bière de Garde and the average Saison, I would expect the Saison to be paler, have a little bit more hop presence, a little bit more phenol character in it, whereas the Bière de Garde I expect to have more focus toward the malt, a richer malt character, less phenol, or at least in comparison to the malt, the phenol isn't going to speak as loudly as it would in the Saison, and definitely not as much hop character as I'd expect in a Saison. Another way to think about the Bière de Garde is, it's been a while since I've talked about my beer love children. If a German Bock, not a Doppelbock, just a plain Bock, if a German Bock got together with a Belgian beer or a French beer with a French yeast, then this is what would come out of it. It kind of has that malt character and presence of a German Bock, but with that Belgian yeast character.
I'm going to go Maibach.
Maibach, great.
If a Maibach was the dad instead of the Bock beer.
Yeah, but without as much hop character, keep
Yes.
that in mind. But yeah, that's a great call on that one too.
Yeah.
So that's a style comparison. Let's talk about the commercial examples.
Absolutely. And, you've got the famous Russian River Brewing Company regards this beer style enough to have made it. Perdition comes up a lot in the beer circles. Saint Sylvester III Mons Blonde, right? You've got Genelaine Ambry, which is the amber, not the blonde. La Choulette Brune, so a brown. And so you've got these great styles that are out there. Go to the specialty import section and try to find these different ones. I have had, but not in a long time, Two Brothers, Domaine du Page, if I'm pronouncing that right. And it was exciting to see a example that wasn't overly aged. And so I would say that you've got a chance in heck, not hell. Well, I just said it, chance in hell of actually finding these, but they're more few and far between.
Okay, it's time to talk about some numbers. For those of you who are going to geek out on numbers with the rest of us, first of all, the alcohol by volume. This is an elevated beer, so 6 to 8.5%. It's going to be a little bit stronger, so got to plan ahead. That's going to translate to if you're an original gravity person, we're looking at 1060 to 1080. That kind of fits that 6 to 8.5% ABV, assuming all fermentation being equal. If you're original Plato person, we're looking at 15 to 20. The final gravity, these beers should attenuate quite well, and we should end up with a drier finish and plenty of carbonation. But that puts this final gravity at approximately 1008 to 1016. Now, that 1016 suggests some body to it. Now, keep in mind, this is a malt-forward beer. There might be some residual sugars left over. It can still have a dry finish, but a bigger mouthfeel. Those are two different concepts. If you're a final Plato person, this is about 2 to 4. When we get into the IBUs, this is not that. The hops are tertiary to this. This is not what the beer is about. So we're looking at 18 to 28, or for all intent and purpose, 20 to 30. If you're trying to memorize it for a test, 20 to 30 is a great way to think of it. This is hop presence without hop dominance at that level. Your color range, we already talked. It can go blonde to brown. So we're looking at 6 to 19. I think that upper number might be even a little bit higher, up into like 22 if I were the one in charge of this. If you're a EBC person or European Brewery Convention, we're looking about 12 to 38 or 12 to 40. Finally, that if you're a Plato person, when it comes to the strength of the beer, we're looking at 13 to 16 as well. Anyway, these numbers have a meaning. They have a purpose. They kind of give you a lead into what the beer is going to be if you understand what they're saying. And for those of you that have to memorize them, good luck. Julie and I have done it, so you can too. But more importantly, let's talk about the glass and the temperature we want this in.
And I mean, I'm flexible in this regard. You do have to remember that if we are talking Belgian style beers, they usually for each brand will have its own designated glassware. But the typical Tiku tulip, which I show a lot, or the Belgian footed and stemmed tulip glass is what I would be after. Absolutely not a pint glass, no way. Run and hide, cry under the bar, and then some. So that's what I would think.
Yeah. What about what temperature would you prefer this at?
Oh yeah, got off on a roll there and forgot temperature. So I want these beers not too warm either. You bring up kind of like maybe a Dunkel's Bach, or I'm saying my Bach. I mean, you don't want something, I think, temperature wise, that's too warm. I still think these beers, even though they're bigger, a little bit bigger in the alcohol, and they are really about the malt. I want them colder. I want it more refreshing in my view. So I'm thinking, what is it, 7 to 10 Celsius, and I mean no more than 40, 42 degrees Fahrenheit, or right out of the fridge, 38 degrees Fahrenheit is fine.
Yeah, and frankly, I would lean more toward the warmer end of cold, just because it's malty. But if you get toward that 50, if you get toward that 10 Celsius, then that's where those phenols can kind of run away a little bit, and that's a tricky spot. Personally, if I could tag on to that,
Yeah.
when it comes to pairing, gosh, I've had a Bière de Garde with some homemade pasta, some homemade noodles a few times, and I really encourage that sort of behavior. This is something where we've got this malt character, we've got this phenol character, and I want to take that and I want to apply that to the savory character. I've done this with a Argentinian steak that I grilled over an open fire and made put some homemade chimichurri over the top, and that was fantastic. Having a creamy pasta with mushrooms, what a great way to add that sweetness, but have those phenols kind of break those flavors and kind of look at it from new ways. A duck with a cassoulet would be ever so fancy, and I want this beer in a fancy teku glass if I'm having duck with cassoulet. Um, but on any given day, you give me a saison or saison-like type of thing, especially with a malt in it. Give me a fancy cheese and charcuterie board, and I'll be yours forever. That's for me. That's the end of a great day.
I'm going with fried cauliflower. And I just think, I mean, cauliflower is kind of like the white potato of the vegetable world almost. They're very neutral, right? It's not broccoli, it's cauliflower. But then you fry it and you actually get a sense of that cauliflower. You can taste it. And I feel like that fried breading is going to go great with the malt in these Bière de Gardes. It's going to maybe help some of that yeast character pop even more. You might dip it, and we were just talking, Jeremy, before the show about aioli sauce. So, like, I
Yeah,
would like
yeah.
my fried cauliflower, dip it in aioli, eat that, and enjoy, and then wash it down with a sip of Bière de Garde, and do that again 10 times in a row.
So what would you season your cauliflower with?
I would keep it pretty mild. I mean, I'm a Maryland girl. I'm not thinking anything Old Bay seasoning or any of that. I like my fried food to kind of speak for the breading itself and the actual essence of the oil. So I'm not very racy in that department, Jeremy. What would you maybe season my cauliflower with?
No, I don't know. I don't often think about cauliflower in terms of like, hey, I should pair that with. So I'm taking notes more than offering suggestions at this point. But what an interesting thing to create this foundation of a flavor to really prop up the beer and let the beer do all the singing. That's kind of what I took from your fried cauliflower kind of idea.
Yeah, and I didn't go entree, right? And when you do that kind of pairing, the beer becomes the sauce, right? Beer can augment sauces and
Mm.
stocks and soups. And so with an appetizer like that, the beer isn't just a refreshment, help, wash down the food, wash down the gullet. It's about being the sauce. So it's a little bit of kind of almost like brown malt flavors being drizzled over and then bridging into that fried breading. I mean, maybe I'd put parsley in there. It'd be nice to have some herbal components that might even help
Ooh,
potentiate some
yeah.
of the beer. Yeah.
That would tie into some of those phenols really well too.
Yeah. There you
Well,
go.
once again, Julia, you've got my wheels turning, and now I'm thinking about what I'm going to have for dinner tonight and what I'm going to drink with it. But this is a beer style that is hard to find, but please seek it out, brew it yourself, find a way and enjoy it. And let's make sure that we bring this beer style back to prominence. We need more Bière de Gardes in our lives. At least I do. So hook a brother up, will you?
I love it. And if you're listening, you're going to start to catch us sneaking in the notion of being a sobs. Thank you for being a
Yes.
sob, sense of beer style, pro-educated and always learning more type of appreciator as opposed to a beer snob. That is not what we're about here. And I would say if you made it to the end of Bière de Garde, you are so not a beer snob. You are a beer
You are.
sobs, and welcome to the group.
Absolutely. Thank you for coming.
Cheers.
Slanka.
Thank you for listening to A Sense of Beer Style, the essential beer style training for those who want to lead in food and beverage. With advanced Cicerones, me, Julia,
And me, Jeremy.
tune into the next episode as we continue exploring the world of beer styles and what to make of them. We encourage you to listen to the prepisodes to build your foundation and better understand beer styles.
And before the next episode, I'd like to ask you to review the show and let us know what you'd like featured in upcoming episodes. Until next time, here's to you and your sense of beer style. Thank you for listening. Cheers.